Thanks for listening to the Media People Podcast, lively and insightful chats with the people who power the media industry. I'm your host, Victor Genova. For more episodes, go to soundcloud.com/mediapeoplepodcast or subscribe on iTunes by searching Media People Podcast. Views expressed by participants are personal. Content marketing. It's an advertising strategy that involves taking a brand's message and infusing it with a story. And my guest today, Shelley Middlebrook, is a leader in this field. Shelley's the president of Fifth Story, a company that specializes in providing content marketing solutions and strategies for clients. But Shelley's path to her current role wasn't as linear as one would expect. Growing up in what she calls Toronto's Scottish ghettos, Shelley started her professional career selling cars. A recession moved her into media sales as a print rep, working for some of Quebecor's B2B publications. Her next role was at Brunico Communications, which started an impressive 11-year stint capped off with her rising to the role of executive vice president. She pivoted to broadcast media at the CBC, and after holding senior roles at Rogers Media, the Globe and Mail, and Postmedia, she's moved into the agency world. In a nutshell, what is Fifth Story and what does your role as president entail?
Fifth Story is a content marketing solutions company. And as president, I'm kind of involved in all things. It's a pretty small company, about 45 people. So all things from sales and marketing to strategy and planning, operations, sort of new business development, and product development. So really all areas.
I guess that's what happens when you're president. You kind of have your fingers in everything that's going on at the agency.
That's true.
But let's start from the beginning. Where are you from?
Collingwood.
Were you born and raised there?
I was, but I only lived there till I was 5, and then I moved to the city, to Toronto.
Interesting. So you moved from cottage country to the big city. You kind of did the reverse of what a lot of other people at least do on the weekends.
That's true. I guess my parents lived there, but I guess there wasn't a lot of job opportunities and things, so they moved to Toronto, and fortunate for me, they did, I think.
Okay, so that's what brought you guys to Toronto then. It was the job market more than anything else.
Yes.
And what was life like growing up in Toronto?
It was good. I first moved to High Park area and lived around there for about a year. And then most of my youth was in Don Mills, which was a fun place to grow up.
You like to call that the Scottish ghetto, I believe. Please tell me how it got that term.
I lived in a set of apartment buildings that are on Don Mills Road. And at the time, most of the tenants were Scottish, maybe some Irish, English, but a lot of people from Scotland in there, and not huge, not the wealthiest neighborhood.
Was your family Scottish? Is that why they landed there?
No, they weren't. They're Canadian, but we just happened to be put into the Scottish ghetto.
It's weird that you call it. You've got the word ghetto associated with Don Mills, because if you look at the way property values are going and everything else, Don Mills is quite the area that a lot of people want to be in nowadays.
Yeah, no, it was a mix. I think it's still probably a little bit, but there's some apartment buildings that were, getting older and a little bit run down, and there was sort of a block of them in the midst of it across from the mall that were, I guess a little bit not the same as all the houses and in different areas. Obviously, there's close by Post Road and things like that are quite nice, and then sort of mid-level, but the Scottish ghetto wasn't the nicest spot. But
you lived in a pretty mixed area. I know that you've said that there was a sort of a division between the classes there, but they kind of came together. You said that a lot of your wealthier friends back then would go off on trips out of the country, but you guys spent most of your time, you said, at the mall?
Yeah, the mall was sort of the center of the universe when we were younger, and as we got older, it kind of became the pool hall and the beer store hanging out in front. But yeah, that was sort of the where we hung out.
What were your interests growing up?
When I was a kid, I guess it was mostly sports, and we were outside playing all the time. So from skateboarding and biking and sports and skating, we were at the arena, was across the street from where I live, so we were there all the time. And as I got older, I guess it was less sports and more interest in music and art and boys and partying and that kind of thing.
A lot of the common stuff that teenagers go after.
Exactly.
But was there anyone that you looked up to or admired when you were growing up? Anyone that really influenced you heavily?
I don't think I had one in particular, but I guess I was always attracted to sort of counterculture type of musicians or music and artists and things like that.
A real rebellious streak, you'd say?
I had a little bit of that in me, yeah, for sure.
Tell me about your parents, though. Were they a big influence on your life?
They were, for sure. I don't know if I realized it when I was younger as much, but looking back on it, definitely. They were very, always sort of preaching to us. I have a brother. You have to get an education, you have to have a job, you have to save money, you have to buy a house, so they were always kept honest about it, but in a good way. We had a lot of fun and did a lot of fun stuff together as well. But I think all those things, even though I had a rebellious streak in me, those lessons and those sort of things that they were preaching to me, I always listened and followed through on the sort of important things that I needed to do.
There were 3 things you said there that I heard growing up as well, about getting property or buying a house, getting an education, and then getting a job. It seemed like the Holy Trinity. Now, my mom worked in an office, but my father was a laborer. And I felt that was something that went hand in hand with him being a laborer. One of the things he used to say to me was, I work midnight shifts, so you don't have to. I got to ask, were your parents laborers by any chance?
My dad was a postman and my mom was a secretary, so not exactly, but sort of, similar kind of. My dad was an auto body guy, too, before he became a postman because of the breathing and stuff with the fumes and that. Similar type of thing.
It's kind of what drove them towards that. That's what they were looking for their kids. But tell me about your first job.
Oh, God, I had so many jobs when I was young. I started working really quite young because I wanted to make money, and I was always sort of ambitious that way. But I think one of the first was working in a real estate office as a receptionist, so after school. I worked at Kitty Cobbler selling shoes to kids, so stinky little wet feet, every fall when it snowed the first time. Eaton's lingerie department.
So you're in retail as well. Everyone's got retail somewhere on their resume.
Yeah, tanning salon, but I didn't like tanning, so I was like the one pale person, who looked unhealthy at the tanning salon. And then waitressing and things like that. I worked in a lot of restaurants, so from hostess and salad prep girl to being a waitress more, as I got older.
I got to ask you about 2 of your gigs because they kind of foreshadow what would happen with your future. You were working as a receptionist at a real estate agency, and we know in sales, real estate agents, it's one of the more cutthroat businesses for sales. And then you also had a stint at Eaton's in sales as well. And I know retail sales is a little bit different. It's not quantified or qualified as heavily as what media sales is, but did you kind of get the sales bug from that? Did you kind of get the inkling that maybe this is what I wanted to do? Or
I don't know, actually. I don't think I realized it then. I always liked people and dealing with people, and the waitressing thing too. It was sort of you're selling stuff and waitressing as well, and selling yourself to get a tip and that. So I guess there was always that in me, but I don't think I realized that's what I wanted to do while I was still in school. I think I thought I didn't think I was going to be in sales when I was in school, for sure.
And in school, specifically university, you went to York and you studied economics. By then, did you think that finance or economics had a future for you?
I was thinking more business, than economics. I originally thought I was going to go into science, and the dissecting of a cat in grade 13 totally turned me off.
I can empathize with that. I was like grade 11. I was like, I'm going to be a doctor. And then, no, I'm not going to be a doctor, and I have to do that. Yeah,
smelly cat parts for 3 months in grade 13, which grade 13 doesn't exist anymore. That's how old I am. But
I had it too.
Okay.
I know what you're talking about.
Phew. But then I was like, I don't know about this. So I switched to economics because more the business side of things. And I thought I might do my MBA. I wrote my GMAT. I was thinking of it, but then I really sort of wanted to start working and making money. And then I kind of got working, and I didn't really want to go back to school.
Money changes everything for you. All it takes is one decent paycheck. What was your first gig then out of university?
I didn't really have to go to university to get it. I don't think I started selling cars. I had gone to Europe right after school because I was working as a waitress and saved up some money. And I lived at home still when I went to university. So I had saved up enough. So I went to Europe for 3 months with a friend. And I came back and I had no money. And so I was I have to make money quickly, now and get a job quickly because I have none. And I thought I might sell real estate. So I was thinking that for a short term. But then I was like, oh, no, I have to take the course. And that's going to take too long, even though I think it was like 6 weeks or something at the time. I just saw an ad for a car salesperson. I'm like, oh, I'll do that. And my parents like, you know nothing about cars. Like, what are you can drive. That's about all you know. And I was like, nah, you can sell anything, whatever. That's fine. I'm going to go do it. So I went and did that for a few years.
And there's good money to be made selling cars. And you probably learned a lot too. I didn't sell cars, but I washed cars at a dealership years and years ago. And I saw a lot of things that went on. And it's a pretty tough gig. Yeah.
It's a lot of waiting for people, because you're sort of standing around. It can be not busy for hours.
That's for sure.
And then you have the the environment where people kind of think or are afraid they're going to get ripped off. So everybody kind of comes at you like you might be ripping them off. And
there is a stigma and a stereotype that goes with being a car salesperson, something that you can't shake.
Yeah, for sure. So you had to learn to deal with that and try and gain people's trust and also try and get them to close right away. Like if they leave, they're probably not coming back to you. Or you'd have to try and instill in them if you spent some time, like, listen, if you do decide on this car, please come back to me, ask for me, I'm on commission. And you kind of have to be a little bit more aggressive in how you would approach it and kind of appeal to their, senses that you've put time in and that they'd come to you if they were going to buy that car, but you'd really want to try and close it on the spot. So it taught me sort of closing, sales, negotiation skills, and also just working. It was pretty male dominated. There often weren't women working with me, other than maybe the receptionist. So you really learn to deal with a bunch of men, too, because they were mostly older men. I was fairly young. They like you when you're not selling, but if you're beating them, and selling more than they are, they don't really like it. So you had to deal with that, too. So it was good.
It's pretty tribal. Working there. No one's sharing any leads or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's not like media sales where we share the pie. But at 22 years of age, though, you hit one of the milestones that I noticed that your parents set out for you, and that was you bought your first property.
I was lucky I lived at home, so I could save some money. Obviously, things didn't cost as much back then either.
I wanted to ask, though, because you kind of have those three things, that holy trinity that your parents laid out for you: get an education, get a job, buy a home. Those three things were all ticked off at 22 years old. Did you kind of take a step back and go, okay, what do I do next if I've already done that?
It wasn't like I felt like, I had a mortgage, I bought a place, but it really wasn't the place I wanted yet. Or I didn't love working in the automotive car sales business. Like I was doing it. I, in fact, hated it. But I was fairly good at it. I think being a woman and being young was an advantage. So I was making pretty good money, but it was a bit of the golden handcuffs because I was kind of like, I looked around, applied for some other jobs, got offered some other jobs working for, bigger brands and in their marketing and different things and their account management. But it was like, oh, okay, I can now, take a pay cut, make half as much or less than half as much as I'm making. So do I want to do that? So it was hard to get out of because I liked the money and I had then committed to a mortgage and different things, but I really didn't like it. So much so that I actually wouldn't even go on vacation or anything because I felt like if I went away and had too much fun, I wouldn't go back. So I was pretty just did it and sort of stuck to it for as long as I could. And luckily, in a way, the economy started going bad in the late 80s. And so I started making less money. And so it was a time where I could kind of make a leap to something else and not take too much of a hit.
And that's when you made the jump to media then. So what was your first gig?
My first gig was at Quebecor, but it was their trade publications. They don't have them now. I think they either shut them down or sold them or something. And so they were trade publications, and it was an office up at Dufferin and the 401. So it wasn't even
that's
downtown.
Way up there.
Yeah. It wasn't sort of like traditional
the
media
whole Young and Bloor, King and Spadina
No, it wasn't
feeling.
that at all. And it was B2B, and it was, again, a little scrappier than probably regular. It wasn't dealing with media buyers or planners too much. It was really dealing more with, one of my publications I worked on was Canadian Welder and Fabricator, sexy as that may be. It was,
very specific audience.
Yes, it was. It was a niche. And back then there was no real online or anything. So you really had an audience who was really trying to get the clients to spend money on advertising, which they might not be thinking of. Versus and have the time to do. They didn't really have marketing people or that. You're dealing with the president or the general manager of the company. But I think, again, sort of being a young woman in that industry kind of helped because it was mostly men. And it was like, wow, a girl's entered our office when you'd show up.
They didn't know how to react. But from there, you moved to Brunico, and Brunico is something that we're all very familiar with. I mean, they just made a major acquisition by getting Marketing Magazine, taking that off of Roger's hands a couple of months ago. So tell us about your time at Brunico, because you had a number of positions there, and you spent, was it 11 and a half, 12 years there?
A little over 11 years. It was a great opportunity. I was at Quebecor, which was great. And again, it was more learning about advertising, but it wasn't really, again, the industry I wanted to be in that. So when I switched to Brunico, they were more in the marketing and entertainment industry. And at the time, they were just in Canada with playback and strategy. So it was not a great economic time then, so it was a little tough, and there weren't very many of us, but it was, the owner was very great in that he made sure that everything always was managed properly from a legal, all the back end stuff was kind of handled, but he wasn't as strong on the sales and marketing front to go out. He had great ideas, but he wasn't really the face of the company. So if you could go out and come up with new ideas and sell, he rewarded you well in terms of new opportunities, pay. So I really learned a lot from him, and he was very good about finding niches in the market that weren't covered. So we really started, the events side of the business, which is really what Brunico is now, mostly events. We went international with a few brands, and that success in those international markets really even made us more successful back in Canada, because usual, Canadians love to see you doing better somewhere else first. Then they go, oh, yeah, that is good. So we kind of went into areas that Canadians had done very well in production side, on the kids' entertainment side, and in documentary reality shows production, sort of the HGTV type of programming and that kind of stuff. So we started a couple international brands and events, and they were huge, and they really took off. And so that, grew the business internationally and into, diversified the revenues from publishing. So as things went more to digital and that, it was a good segue to go more into events, and their publishing really became more content marketing for their events. And it was exciting. And then the company grew a lot while I was there. So I kind of went from sales to sort of sales management, publishing, so sort of looking after all the editorial content and advertising and marketing and circulation and events. And so it really, at the end, I was the EVP at the company, and I owned a small amount of the company as well. So it was a great time, a great experience.
Tell us about how you climbed that ladder internally. You hear that from a lot of people where they say, oh, we can't break through internally for promotion. It always goes to someone externally when there's that posting. I mean, did you go in and say to your bosses or your supervisors, I want to stay at the company, this is where I see myself, or do you just kind of wait back for an opening? How do you approach it? Like, what kind of advice would you give to someone who genuinely loves where they are and they want to climb up the company ladder, how to make that move strategically?
There's a few things. I mean, I think it's good to be clear what you're hoping for and what you're looking for, but it's also, I think you just have to get in and do it. And I think you have, in part of that is the right timing. If a company's growing and the situation's there to grow with it, which there was when I was at Brunico, so I was fortunate. Part of the growth was because I just took it on. I started doing things, and I was allowed to. It was a small company. We were entrepreneurial. So before getting a promotion or before I was told I could do something, I'd just run it by, hey, can I do this? I didn't ask, oh, can I have a different title? Can I make more money? I'd just, suggest different things where I thought we could make money, and he'd let you try it, and if it worked. So he was very good about letting you try things, and then though rewarding you if, with it as well. But there was the downside if it didn't work as well, of course.
If you risk nothing, you risk everything.
Yeah.
So you'd relate that back to, you'd say a lot of your growth at Brunico came down to a lot of ideas that you had that you ran with. You're really entrepreneurial and proposing different challenges or different things for the business. Yes,
I think that was a lot. I think that was the environment there, and it was really encouraged. So it was a great environment, and I was so used to that. It was very difficult when I moved to bigger environment, when I wasn't used to, like, we just do whatever was best to grow the business and make money. And when you're not in an environment that is exactly like that, even though most companies say that's what they're about. It's when you get into a huge structure and multiple layers and matrixed and whatever, it usually isn't exactly like that. There's more politics. It's just natural, it comes into it. So, I've realized I'm the type of person who is better in an entrepreneurial environment where you can have ideas and try them and develop them, and a bigger environment where there's a lot of red tape to get things through and approvals, I find more frustrating, I think, to work within.
Great segue into your next gig. After Brunico, you moved on to CBC, and that's interesting because you went from trade, print, digital events to the television world, or it was primarily television and it was digital as well at that time, and you went from B2B to consumer. What made you move on to CBC? I was at Brunico for 11 years, and I kind of had gone as far as I could go there, really, or I felt. And at the time, I also unexpectedly got pregnant, so I wasn't expecting to be expecting. So I
was realizing I had traveled so much in my job. I was on the road probably about a week out of a month. A lot of our clients were international. We dealt with a lot of trade shows and events that were international. And I knew in having a child, I wouldn't be able to, for a while anyway, be able to travel the same way. And so I really didn't feel like I could do as good a job at Brunico that I had been. But I really didn't want to take a different position or a lesser position either. So I thought it was probably a good time to, see what else was out there and just, the grass is always greener, and I hadn't worked at that many places, and I was still fairly young. So I was thinking, okay, I should see what else I should do. And I didn't at that time realize that I wouldn't necessarily like a large company or that it would work that differently. I had been at Quebecor, but I was so junior and it was so small, and we were in a little office, so we sort of operated separately and entrepreneurially even there.
And even Quebecor, their head office is in Montreal. So you're the satellite office either way, even if you are at the main office in Toronto.
Yeah, exactly. So, and we weren't even the main office in Toronto. We were like a satellite of the main office in Toronto. So we were really
the Toronto satellite office.
Exactly. And we were such a little blip that nobody cared about us or wondered what we were doing. So we could kind of do what we wanted anyway. So it wasn't, it was still, there was a lot of ownership and involvement in everything. So then when I went to, when I was looking, I was, not sure. And I thought, well, I need to be something. I'm good at sales, management role. I'm interested. I've, even though I haven't worked in media, not media, entertainment or broadcasting or that, we've been covering it and publishing and doing digital. And so I understand how it all works fairly well. So I thought it would be a good, I was looking at many jobs, and that's just the one that happened to come through. And so I went there, and it was great. It was a great experience and great learning, and there were a lot of great people at CBC. I learned a lot. I dealt with, bigger dollars than I'd ever dealt with. We had the Olympic sponsorships then, and Hockey Night in Canada. And so, we're doing big sponsorship deals with clients for the Olympics and hockey and football. And so it was great. It was, bigger dollars. I loved the bigger packages and the more custom things we were doing. But I didn't myself as the one of the sales managers, but, my team was selling a lot of just, GRP a week, by city too. So that part's very admin heavy, pretty boring, and, my opinion, it's not really what it excites me or whatever. So that part of it, I didn't love. It was just a lot of administrative work. But I went through a lot of interesting things there. There was the hockey layoff, or the hockey, I guess it was... it was
the lockout. So you mean movie night in Canada?
Yes.
When it was shifted to that.
Yes, exactly. There was the hockey lockout, but then there was the CBC staff lockout too, where the management, which I was part of, was, kind of running the show and trafficking ads and doing everything. So there was a lot of interesting things we went through while I was there. 2 Olympics, was there for a summer and winter Olympics. So it was really interesting. I learned a lot, met a lot of great people, but it was a little bit not fast moving enough, and it was pretty bureaucratic. A lot of things couldn't be approved. Your clients would have a lot of questions for you. You couldn't get back to them with an answer very quickly. They'd get annoyed. You'd be waiting. Well, sports programming, let us do this, integrate General Motors into, whatever.
No, I know exactly.
And so it was
You're
tough.
talking to an ex-CBCer as well.
Yes.
I faced some of the questions that you have, not at your level, but absolutely I know where you're coming from there. But did any of the learnings from the B2B world transfer over to consumer? Like, you were able to bring anything from Brunico over, apart from your experience?
It was just more experience, how to deal with people, manage people, handle clients. Some of the custom, ideas, I think, being creative and coming up with ideas. I think that can work across really any type of platform or that if you're that type of person. So I think that kind of stuff, but a lot of it wasn't similar, no.
But after that, you moved to Hello Magazine, and you worked on the launch of that at Rogers. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, also very fun. I was at CBC. I was kind of realizing, I need to be in a bit more entrepreneurial kind of environment, I think, than CBC. So it was a good opportunity from startup. So when I started, we weren't publishing yet, and we was getting the whole team and hiring them and really working through how the business plan on how we were going to work with the partners. And it was a licensing deal with Spain, who owns the Hello
That's right.
brand.
It is a global brand, right? It was under license.
Yeah. So there was the Spanish and the British, which most people know from the royalty coverage in that. And so when we launched in Canada, it was great. There was a lot of integrations, and we launched around film festival time, and very involved in TIFF and events and celebrities coming into town. And so there was a lot of great, exciting things that happened with that.
But you also had to forecast circulation before there even was any circulation for it. How did that go?
Yeah, that was a little tricky. So the business plan was a little flawed, I think. In the end, Hello's been one of their most successful publishing brands, I think. But at the beginning, they right off, there wasn't a mailed circulation or subscribers. So it was really all newsstand sales. So getting those pockets in retail and selling through a new product, a magazine people didn't know or knew of the British but didn't know the Canadian, as well as the number of copies and the price, and that they were pretty. They were hoping for big results. Like the results they thought they'd sell in a week was more than what Chatelaine and Maclean's were selling in a year on newsstands. So it was pretty aggressive what they had predicted. So very shortly, in less than a year, they made major cuts, including me, the publisher, the editor, the art director, a number of other people, and sort of repositioned it. They cut the price. They, got more newsstands. And in the end, it's been very successful, but it was kind of painful making the move there, building the team, starting it off, and then, within less than a year, them pulling sort of the carpet out from under, a few of us. But hey, it happens.
And I believe it comes down to the fact that you guys did not have Kate Middleton back then.
Oh, yes. That would have made us much more successful. We had Charles.
You guys had Charles, no Kate Middleton. Because it's funny that we talk about Hello Canada, and Rogers cut pretty much every publication. They either took them off the market for 2017 or reduced them from like weekly to monthly, and Hello was the only one that was untouched. And I got to believe that has to do with Kate Middleton, and then Prince Harry now having a girlfriend and possibly having a wedding next couple of years. Yeah. Funny how those little things turn everything around for a media company. But you did move on to content publishing, and tell us about your time there.
That was a really quick one too. That was I had just got laid off from Hello, and the publisher there, publisher Jeffrey Daw, was going away traveling for a year, and so they needed someone to fill on Inside E. So I worked with the other owner, Michael King, for a year, and he sort of did the FQ and Sir, which were fashion magazines, and I looked after Inside E, but reported into him while Jeff was away. So that was a short stint. It was similar to Hello, only it was distributed within one of the newspapers in the Post. And so so that was a short but similar type of thing, working with, celebrity entertainment type of content, but then tying it into events and things like that. So it was sort of an extension in a way of Hello a little bit.
After that, you landed at the Globe and Mail, and it was at an interesting time for not just the advertising industry, but for the entire globe. It was the Great Recession. That had just hit. I personally was bumped up to TV rep, Beijing Olympics. Money was raining from the skies. It was going very well. And then about 6 weeks after that, the whole world came to a stop. You as a new manager at a new company, how did you cope? How did you keep your team motivated? What sort of things did you do? Because it's kind of like a very challenging situation to come into for a new manager at a new company.
To be honest, the Globe was a little bit protected, maybe more than other brands. They still got luxury brands and luxury business, but at the same time, we were going through different changes that, developing sort of packaged goods and the lifestyle section, and they were sort of reinvigorating the brand at that time too. So I think we had some new things to offer. We had new digital and mobile apps and different things to sell. So I think we still managed to do okay. It was, things were down, but we found new areas to grow and we're creative about it. We did a lot of custom content programs, small business. We really grew. We made a small business hub. We just looked for different niches to get money from that maybe hadn't been areas where we had gotten as much. And then I think we just tried to celebrate, the small wins and just keep positive, looking for new ways to grow the business and to do some creative things and keep the clients happy and come up with new things that if they had less money to spend, if it was something new and interesting, maybe we could take to them, that we could sell them that way.
In a way, it's kind of funny because I experienced this too at CBC, that a recession forces big companies to relax, for lack of a better term, their bureaucratic policies. They let people get a little bit more creative. So it's kind of a blessing in disguise.
Yeah,
not for commissions. For creativity, it's wonderful. But for commissions, it's horrible. But after that, you moved over to Postmedia. And I want to hear about your time there, but I was wondering if you could give us a bit of a comparison between the two companies, because if you look at Postmedia and the Globe and Mail, they're kind of like Coke and Pepsi. They're both very strong print publications, quality news. They're rooted in print with the big digital extension. Basically, if they were to ask who's each other's competition, they both point to each other. Give us a bit of that comparison there.
Yeah, so the Globe and Mail was really selling one brand, a really strong brand. With Postmedia, you're really selling multiple brands. There's the National Post. By the time I got there, the National Post had gone sort of through the heyday and had many cutbacks and stuff. It was still a good publication, but not quite as strong probably as the Globe and Mail. Didn't have as big a footprint, wasn't doing as well. But Postmedia overall, with all of its publications and all the strength they had, especially out west and in different markets, was strong overall nationally. So you could offer different things. I was the VP of digital sales on the national side. It was sort of the Wild West because you had 10 different publishers and you had digital managers and local sales and fighting with national sales. And so it was hard to sort of harness the inventory that we had digitally to really be able to sell big national campaigns because you were competing against, and it wasn't very well managed. It was sort of the Wild West. They'd gone through a lot of changes and layoffs and, many things. So kind of trying to organize that and bring it together and then be able to maximize the revenue was really interesting. You could be creative there because, again, it was a big place, but it wasn't the Globe was much more formal and buttoned down. I found that Postmedia is much more entrepreneurial and would try different things and quite quicker to move than the Globe and Mail. Less resourced, I think, than the Globe and Mail for sure, and going through a lot more change and financial issues than the Globe and Mail was.
That's got to be difficult for someone. I hope you don't mind me asking you this candidly. I mean, what's it like working at a company where you're hearing about those financial trials in other publications? That's something that I think we take too seriously in the media world because other publications will use the opportunity to pick on their competition. I mean, you go back the last year, people have picked on Postmedia. Then they picked on Globe when they were doing the voluntary buyouts. Twitter's taken a bit of a kicking in the media. Then it's been Yahoo. I mean, how is it being an employee and sort of being like, oh God, here's what the competition's saying to us again? Is it easy to lose focus, or do you just kind of plow through?
I don't think it's the competition, what they're saying so much, because really, by the time they're saying that, and there might be some, sour grapes kind of thing, like the Globe and National Post maybe have been were at one point in big competition, but I don't think really now there's that much competition there. But I don't think it's that. I think really when there is that news out there, it probably is happening. So there's a lot of pressure internally. I mean, I think there's just been so much change in the media industry. I think even more so since I left. Postmedia was back in, I think, 2012. Since then, there's even been much more disruption and much more chaos and layoffs and people fearful for their jobs and not knowing, who's going to get cut and what's going to happen. And so I think that working in that environment is stressful for people, and that there ends up being a lot more internal focus and worrying about your job and trying to manage internal relationships instead of worrying about your clients and doing well. And not meaning that those brands don't worry about their clients and aren't doing well. And I still think they manage to do a good job. I just mean it does distract people when there's going to be layoffs coming up. I mean, the Globe and Mail, they know it ahead of time that there's going to be buyout packages. The union gets notified. They get told.
There's a whole thing that
so
they go through.
People start knowing about it and thinking about it. And am I going to take a package? Am I not? So all that unrest and, I have to reapply for jobs. I mean, that takes the focus off of just doing your job and doing it well. It just adds another layer to, that people have to worry about. So, and then just the changeover, like people leaving, people either taking on their work or hiring new people. I mean, there is all that chaos internal.
Turnover causes a lot of disruption. I mean, you yourself as a manager, then you have to worry about training this new person here because of that.
Exactly. Or dealing with less people and how are we going to manage the same clients and give them the same customer service and that they expect. And with less people. So, I think it's, or the same great content that we've always delivered with less people. So it's not easy. I feel bad for a lot of my friends are in this industry. And so it's been a tough few years, I think. But there's also lots of new and exciting things happening too. So
a door closes, a window does open. You've just got to look for it.
Exactly.
No, I agree there. But then you moved over to the Fifth Story, and this is your first foray, into the agency world.
Yeah.
So tell us how you landed here. You kind of crossed the aisle, we could say.
Yeah, and I don't know if I wouldn't really call us an agency because we're sort of like an agency, but we're not exactly either. But it is more, I guess, like an agency. What happened was I was on a contract at Postmedia and then got laid off there, and I was like, oh my God, how many more jobs like this can I do in media? It's just getting really frustrating, so much change. I was really sort of, questioning whether I wanted to stay in media or what I wanted to do. And I happened to see a posting on LinkedIn for this job for, I think it was EVP of sales and marketing at this company, but it didn't say the name of the company. And I kind of looked at it and read it, and it was through a headhunter, and I was like, oh, I think this might be a company that my boss at Quebecor, back when I worked there, Ruth Douglas, I think she owns this, and she bought it off of MDC when she worked for them. And so I was like, I wonder if this is Ruth's company. So I reached out to the hunter. It sounded very interesting. And I, said, oh, I'm interested. This is my background. By the way, is this, Ruth Douglas's company? And he replied back, yes. Oh, Shelley, I've heard of you. Actually, your name's come up and blah, blah, blah. So it ended up being very perfect because I was sort of like, I need a change. And really the company Fifth Story was, which was known as News Canada at the time and still is, on our sort of PR services and earned media. It had been around for many years. I knew what they did. It was in around what we did, but it really wasn't in the media industry. It was more PR services and measurement that News Canada provided. So it was like, okay, interesting. And then when I came and talked to her and learned more about it, I was like, okay, this is interesting. There's an interesting opportunity here. But I do think as the industry is changing, there's more of a opportunity for us to evolve the company and make it more into a content marketing company than sort of earned PR services that we once provided. That's part of still what we provide, but that's not, the only thing we do now.
What does Fifth Story define as content marketing?
Creating content that is valuable for audiences, for a target audience that will inform them or educate them or entertain them, that they might seek out. It will change the way they will engage with a company or seek out that company and lead towards them either purchasing their services or interacting with that brand, but it's not as direct as advertising.
A lot more of the entertainment and information value in it, I find, with content marketing.
Yeah.
Where did the name Fifth Story come from?
Well, it was very difficult. We were looking to rebrand because the name News Canada really, it works for earned media distribution, but it really did not work for us creating content and video and being more of a creative company. And
News Canada would sound to me like a competitor to Reuters.
Yeah,
that's what I would think of immediately.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people would think we were a media company or a newswire service, or they weren't really sure what. When we were going through the rebranding and repositioning of the company, considered many names, and we were having a hard time coming up with a name. How creative do we want to be? How much do we want it to sort of explain what we do? So we kind of liked a creative name, but we were also kind of like, okay, we're storytellers. We kind of figured we were kind of working in the space of sort of 5 main services. So from, insights and production, distribution, measurement, analytics. So we're kind of like, okay, sort of those 5 areas of services. We happen to be on the 5th floor of the building that we're in. So it just kind of, it came out, I don't know, Fifth Story, I think along the lines, Fifth Estate, those types of things. Like sort
I totally hear you.
Yeah. So it was sort of like it came out of a bunch of different brainstorming sessions, and that was sort of the one we landed on. And
you've got an impressive roster of clients. I could go on forever, but clients like Home Depot, P&G, RBC, and so much more. And if people want to see the roster or sample, if they go to fifthstory.com, literally on your homepage, you scroll down and you've got a good sample of some of the work you've done with some of your key clients. Is there an execution, though, that you're particularly proud of?
How we're different than a traditional agency that you might think of as a lot of agencies are AORs, and they have, really deep relationships, and they're working with a handful of clients that they work with. Whereas we work with a number of clients, some of them on just, sort of more tactical services that we're providing, and then some where we're working with them more on from strategy to, production to distribution to measurement, so some sort of the full gamut. One of the clients that we've been working with over the last year is Choice Hotels. We've been doing some really interesting work with them and their agency, their AOR BRAC. They had not been as much in the digital social world and wanting to do more than that. They'd been doing more traditional marketing, but as a travel type client, they really obviously knew they needed to be, people are really purchasing and making decisions in the digital social world in the travel category in particular, and going online and booking hotels and that. So we worked with them to create a program last summer that was a content program there with multiple pieces of content in English and French, and it was a video mainly, but a lot of then sort of short videos, micro videos and photos and cinemagraphs for their social. So we created a whole social and digital campaign for them that worked really well and did well, and we're just working with them more on PR. We had started out originally on PR, but kind of went more into the digital and social, working with them, and now it's sort of evolving the relationship. So, but that was a really fun, interesting campaign.
There's one campaign you guys did. I saw it on your website, and I poured over a lot of the work you guys had done before I got here. I really enjoyed, and I encourage anyone listening to this to go to fifthstory.com and look at it, the San Pellegrino campaign.
Oh, yeah, that was a fun.
I like the concept of what you guys had, because, and I don't mean this in a dismissive way, but when it comes to carbonated water, there's very little that you can do with it. And I like the fact that San Pellegrino already had something that they were doing in Venice, and you were able to kind of find that Canadian connection with Chef Danny Smiles, and then took that whole, I'm a film student, so that whole cinema verite style to that sort of micro documentary, kind of like where you left the cameras on and you were just a fly on the wall, letting Danny do his thing in that competition where they were supporting the young chefs. And it showed, to me, it showed that San Pellegrino was so much more committed to not just giving you fizzy water, but to the culinary arts. And it made, I'll be honest with you, it makes me more likely to ask, not for club soda next time I'm at the restaurant, but for a San Pellegrino.
Oh, that's good to hear. Yeah, that was a fun one as well. That was a few years ago, and it was a great piece, yeah.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self any advice, what would it be?
I don't know. It's hard. I think, sometimes I would probably give myself the advice to not be as direct or as aggressive or straightforward as I sometimes am, but in the same way, I think that is probably what's also gotten me where I've gotten to in my career and pushes me forward. That's the type of person I am. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work with everyone, but I don't know if I could change it exactly. Maybe I would have toned it back a few times along the way, but it is what it is.
I hear you. Diplomacy is my new favorite word. It's something I've had to employ in the last couple of years in this industry. If you weren't in media, what do you think you'd be doing and why?
I already am kind of in the real estate. I have a few apartments that I have, so I probably would be more in real estate, I would imagine, and probably whether it would be managing properties, buying and managing properties, or renovating and flipping them, or what that might be, but that's probably where I'd be.
Shelley, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's been fun.
That's it for today's show, but for more episodes, you can go to soundcloud.com/mediapeoplepodcast or subscribe on iTunes by searching Media People Podcast. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter @VicGenova.